Welcome to Cincy Entrepreneurs Unplugged, where EO Cincy members lay it all on the line, sharing real stories of their worst moments and greatest lessons learned. Get ready for an action-packed series featuring a dynamic lineup of EO Cincinnati members.
Hey, thank you for joining us today for Cincinnati Entrepreneurs Unplugged, where my guest is Christy Pretzinger from WG Content. Cincinnati Unplugged is all about where entrepreneurs share their real stories, their worst moments, and their greatest accomplishments. So Christy, tell us a little bit about yourself first and your company.
Well, I've been running this business since I guess it's been about 20 years now. Prior to that, I was a freelance writer, so I am virtually unemployable. I haven't had a job since 1993, something like that. It's been a long time. So I started out, like I said, as a freelance writer, and then started building Writer Girl around 2005, and really didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea it would turn into a multi-million-dollar business. I really didn't. I couldn't even have fathomed that. I studied French in college, and I learned that when you are fluent in another language, it makes you more articulate in your first language. And so I was able to be a writer, kind of parlay that into a career, and then started building Writer Girl. And then what happened, really, the turning point happened when I had an agency that was here in Cincinnati, and people knew me here because I'd been a freelancer for a while. And so somebody approached me and said they needed a team of writers for a big project. And so I did that, and it went really well. And we did it in a pretty short timeline. And I thought, oh, that's really good. A team of writers to big projects. Fast forward, I don't know, 6, 8 months, something like that. And then another former client came to me, and she was a marketing director at a hospital system in the Dayton area. And they had 3 websites they were launching concurrently. And she was under the impression that they were mostly done, and asked me to help, but they hadn't done, nothing had been done on any of them. So before I knew it, I had like 30 writers. I hadn't vetted these people. I didn't know anything about them. And I didn't know anything about hospitals either, by the way. And so I had these people on there, and we did these 3 websites. And, this is something that I know you and I just talked about. It was like we were moving fast and fixing things because we had to, because we didn't know what we were doing. So we were making mistakes and then fixing it. So after that was done, I thought, oh, I will bring teams of writers to hospitals. And then, to quote our friend and fellow member, Chris Frutkin, I told myself the necessary lie that it will be easy. And then I went on from there. So it kind of, I think, one of the first big clients that I landed, nobody in Cincinnati would talk to me. You can't be a prophet in your own hometown. The first one that I landed was Ohio State, and they are still with us. And that was probably around 2007, maybe, something like that. And they're still a client with us. They've been a client for a long time.
Wonderful, wonderful, great story. I've heard you speak many times, and I know you have a fascinating culture, and you've got a new book coming out on culture. Could you tell us about the title and a little bit about how it came about?
Sure. It's called Your Cultural Balance Sheet: Keys to Creating an Environment Where People Can Thrive. And actually it came about because of EO. My forum, a wonderful, wonderful group of people. I was having dinner with several of them, and in my forum at the time, there had been several people who had had successful exits. So, we would have conversations about EBITDA and exiting and VC and PE money and things like that. And we were sitting there. I'm someone who doesn't know what I think frequently until I say it. So I'm kind of a verbal processor. So I remember, I know exactly where I was sitting, and I was sitting there, I was kind of looking off, and I said, of course I look at my balance sheet, but it's almost like I look at my business through the lens of a cultural balance sheet. And then our friend and fellow member, Jim Salters, looked at me and said, well, there's your book. And he had been kind of pushing me to write a book anyway. Took me forever to do it. I mean, it's been, gosh, it probably took 4 years to get this thing done because it just wasn't a sense of urgency, but now I feel like there is. So anyway, that was how it came about. And it's been a fun journey writing it. And it's been interesting. When I discovered about 5 years ago, we were working with consultants, and the first thing the consultants did was survey all the employees at the time. And they were trying to find out what was our core, what was the core of our business, the thing without which we would not sort of exist. And they discovered that it was our culture. And at the time I thought, well, that's really interesting. And I can't remember if that was concurrent with the title of the book. I can't remember the timing of that. But I know that I remember thinking, a lot of business owners wouldn't think of culture as something that contributes to the bottom line. But in my experience, it certainly does. One of the things that we know is a hidden cost on a balance sheet is employee turnover. And, one of the best ways to keep your business healthy is to hold on to people. There's a proverb, I can't remember if it's like an African proverb or what, but it says like every time a person leaves an organization, it's like a library burning to the ground. And, you think about all the IP that your employees have and how valuable that is, so anyway, yeah, that was kind of how that came about. And so the book, we're just waiting on our publisher right now. We've got everything finally done. The PDF is done, is all ready to go. I just have to figure out if that person has ghosted me or if I need to make other plans. So hopefully it'll be out soon because we're self-publishing through KDP. So
Fantastic, fantastic. So I've read a lot of the articles and stuff on your company and all of that as well. And I know your culture has 4 very cool values. Can you tell us a little bit about your 4 core values?
sure. We are empowered, curious, kind, and fun. And, being a word person, and these were definitely co-created with the team. It's been years though, since we've done them. They have to roll off your tongue. I'm a big believer in like, not the alliteration, but just the way that it goes, like fun, empowered, curious, and kind doesn't really work as well as empowered, curious, kind, and fun. And so, one of the things that I'm a firm believer in is that your values should remain constant. It shouldn't be a flavor of the day. You don't go changing them. Now, the expression of those values may change, but the values themselves should stay the same. And in our case, it's a thread that flows throughout our organization and upon which every decision can hang. We do a lot of things. We engineer the processes and structure of our organization, our meetings, and all these things to allow for the weaving of the tapestry that is the culture. And so when it comes to our values, we have engineered our team meetings. What we do with those is once a month, when we have our all hands meeting, our HR coordinator solicits nominations from employees about whatever value we're focusing on that month. So if it's empowered, we don't ask the question, how have you felt empowered or have you been empowered? We say, how have you demonstrated empowerment? Because that's a switch in the brain too. It shows them, because if somebody says, have you felt empowered? The first thing you do is like, well, no, you haven't done anything for me. But if you say, how have you demonstrated empowerment? It changes it and it engages a different part of the brain. So we ask the questions that way. What's great about that is it actually addresses a couple of the values. It addresses the value that we're soliciting nominations for, but it also, ignites our value of being kind, because you get to recognize a peer and it's inevitably kind because you're choosing someone and saying, gosh, this person's really fun, or this person demonstrated empowerment really beautifully by doing XYZ. So it's a win-win, and it keeps all the values top of mind. We also do a thing in our newsletter where we have a kudos our newsletter is every 2 weeks. I think, yeah, every 2 weeks. It's called the WG Roundup. And we have an entire section that's on kudos, and frequently people do it around the values.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So kindness is such a different word than most companies have as culture today. So tell me more about that kindness and how people demonstrate it to each other, how they bring it to life.
It's interesting. One time I was on a podcast talking about my book, and someone said, you build your business based on kindness. That's what happened. It was when I started building it. I said to my accountant at the time, if I can't build a business based on kindness, then I'll go back to being a freelance writer. And it was only, again, in retrospect, that I was like, that was interesting. And then someone asked me a question. They said, why was kindness your driver? Did you work for unkind people? I was like, what a good question. Nobody ever asked me that question before. I had to really think about it. And I was like, no, actually, I did not work for unkind people, but the structures that they worked within did not foster kindness. And then that was like an aha moment for me too. And I realized that we have, as I said, have engineered our structure and our processes to foster kindness. Just the way that we are set up as an organization, the way that we encourage cross-team pollination. We have lots of little groups. We have a book club, we have a kindness counts group, we have moment makers where we can recognize moments with our clients, our associates, our coworkers, all these kind of things, and they're all cross-pollinated. So the whole idea of it, I think part of it is for me, and I'll share something about this too, but that for most entrepreneurs, your business is a reflection of you. It's hard to separate it, right? It's sort of like saying, that book, There Is No Such Thing as Business Ethics, because it's like you're either ethical or you're not. it's the same kind of thing. It's like, I am a kind person. That really is who I am. And I always wanted to be that. So the organization grew up around me, and that's part of me. And so the organization is that way. I would never put up with someone who was unkind. That simply wouldn't happen. So as the organization was growing and I was the one doing the hiring, everything I did was really more around, I figured when it was first just writers, I figured you weren't even talking to me unless you were a good writer, more than likely. So what I would do is talk to people and be like, how are your interpersonal skills? When I'm interviewing you, are you smiling and nodding? How's your body language? Are you mirroring and matching? Are you going to be okay if I put you in front of a neurosurgeon and you're going to interview this person, things like that? Now we're much more sophisticated than that. We have a whole process and tests and things that we do. But so when I did that, when I started, it was very much around people that I felt I could be around, that I would, for lack of a better term, like vibrate at the same energy level, that we could kind of do that. And so as it grew, then what happened is that people would bring their friends, they would bring people they had worked with before. Two of my friends' daughters work for the organization. So there's a lot of that. So it has grown very organically with people that know other people, have worked with other people. In fact, three of my very my longest term employee is 13 years, 13 and a half now. And then she brought on my next longest term employee, which is 12 years at the end of this month. They worked together. And then the two of them together, a couple years later, brought on who is now our EVP of Business Development and Marketing. And she worked there too. So the three of them all worked at the same company here in Cincinnati. And now they're all here and they're all on my leadership team. So what's great is those relationships, they've known each other for probably close to 20 years. And so there's these interconnected relationships. And then another woman who's one of our 10-year project managers worked with my COO at a job 25 years ago and brought her on. So there's a lot of that kind of thing. And then what happens as a result is people know each other. And if you know each other, you tend to be kind. And people here wouldn't put up with someone being unkind. There's no snarkiness. We are all women, and there is no snarkiness. There's no gossip and backstabbing and things like that. And it just is that people are just kind. They live out that value.
Love it, love it, love it. So I wanted to ask you a question about the metrics of how you run your company. What are some of the metrics you use? I love this answer you gave me ahead of time.
Well, you asked me about the metrics of the culture, and I said, well, we do culture surveys, I think once a year, something like that. And like last year, they wanted to enter best places to work. We've never done it before, and I didn't care. And so they all said, yeah, they wanted to, and everybody answered, and we won best places to work. So that's a big indicator for me that people, number one, wanted to enter because they're like, heck yeah, I want people to know how great my place is. And then, two, that every single person participated and we won. So that's obviously a metric. For me, it's more about keeping my finger on the pulse of the business all the time. So as an example, in the past couple of years, we made a very, very significant investment in Salesforce. And then we also purchased another product that is patented and then worked really hard to merge the two to create something new. And it was a lot of work, and it changed our processes. It reduced our tech stack significantly, but it changed our processes a lot and made them more techy. And so when I would, and I don't even have a password for Salesforce, so I don't even go in there. But and it's funny, if I ask for it, they're like, why? What do you need? And let me just get it for you. Like, don't go in there.
Yeah, don't do it. Don't do it.
Okay, I won't. But I remember being in a leadership team meeting, and they were talking about some of the longer term employees, which usually is what it is. People who've been around longer have seen the arc of it and are like, oh, it's changed, and I don't like the way it's changed, maybe a little bit. So I remember talking to them and saying, did we come up with a tech solution for a relationship company? And I'm not suggesting that you undo anything, but I think we want to look at that. We don't want to take the joy out of the work. And granted, work is sometimes hard. It's not always fun, but the whole driver for this for me around the culture is allowing, specifically in our case, women. It just happened to be women because that's who tends to be liberal arts degree and in marketing and stuff. And that's what happens. And it was called Writer Girl. So there was that too. But in any case, for all the women, that they could do meaningful work and still parent. Their children could see that they could do meaningful work and still parent, and that they could find great satisfaction in being a contributor to something like that. So for me, I'll touch base with people occasionally. If somebody comes across my mind, I'll like reach out and say, hey, let's just chat, no agenda, let's just chat, see how things are going. And then of course, when somebody has a 10-year anniversary, we have lunch or dinner. And so I talk to them about, how do they feel things are going and stuff like that. So I definitely am the one who keeps my eye on the culture, but I ask my team to tell me, are you hearing things? Is there something? And they alert me if there's something like, hey, we kind of noticed this, we're addressing it because we want to make sure that this doesn't turn into anything bigger. So everybody is a steward of the culture, really, and certainly the leadership team, but even the people on the team all protect it because they know how rare it is and they appreciate it. So they protect it very much.
That's wonderful. I'm going to go off the things we were going to ask in order and talk about being a completely virtual company and how you keep culture, how you do culture with a virtual company. I think you have some great tips for people on that.
I think it's interesting because we were always virtual because I never wanted an office because I never wanted to have to go there. And I also didn't want people to know how little I worked because my goal was always to not work very much. I mean, I would never be in the office, so I didn't want to do that. But I also just didn't want to have to go there. And gosh, when I go somewhere now in the morning and I see traffic, I'm like, oh my gosh, I would just make my life miserable. So I'm really happy we don't do that. But I think what happened because of it being virtual, something I speak a lot about is that whatever you're talking about, doesn't matter whether you're talking about building trust or leading with vulnerability or being an empathetic leader, whatever it is, you have to have both intention and then pay attention to your intention. You can't have one without the other. So what happens when you're doing something virtually, because of the very fact that you don't have a water cooler, you don't have a coffee room, you don't have a break room, you have to really be intentional about building a culture. So we do things as we've grown, and now we have an HR coordinator who's awesome. So she does all sorts of little things. But we always made a point of trying to get together. If people were in town, we would have lunch with each other. We would do a lot of the in-person meetings with the people who were in town. And a lot before we got bigger, I think there was maybe somebody, maybe just in Columbus, and she would come in town. And then we would have our in-person meetings and things like that. Now we have people in different states, so it's a little harder. It's more expensive and it's more difficult to get people in person. So we tend to do that really about twice a year. And we have people in person, and we don't make it all about working. We make it about being together. This past year, we did our retreat at Lietza's Gallery, ADC Fine Art. And it was wonderful. And we did things like flower arranging. We had someone come in and bring some flowers, and we did flower arranging. And we did some other things where it was like we put people into little breakout rooms like speed dating. And you got together with someone that you didn't really work with and asked them a lot of questions. And so you got to talk to people you didn't know. Then we also did something where we had tables set up and you sat down and there was a note card there and you drew somebody's name and then you were supposed to decorate the card with their name. And then everybody went around and wrote something nice about that person or that they appreciated about that person in that card, and everybody got to take it home. So we did things like that as opposed to working and we're going to have a working session and we're all going to do this. We like to make sure that we just get to be together. And that is massively meaningful for people. But we also, like I said, we do a lot of things that it sounds silly, but one day we just did the other day, last week, I think it was, one of our employees sent out a, what do they call those things? The things that you can color in, but it's like a mudra. Isn't it like a mudra?
I don't know that word. I call them coloring books.
Anyway, it's just a design that you can color.
Okay, yeah.
This one had an intention around it. And so the person who was leading it said, okay, everybody print this out before the meeting. And then everybody got into a Teams meeting. And then she said, I'm going to play some meditative music, but the center circle, this is the one you're going to be coloring first. This one represents the core of who you are. You can put words in there, you can draw something in there, you can do whatever you want and then color it in. And then the next one is people that are meaningful or whatever in your life. And you can use words or whatever you want to do. And then you're going to color that. And so she would do like, I don't know, 3 minutes for each one or something like that with this quiet meditative music and everybody's silent and we're all just coloring and doing things. And then we ended it and some people like here, this one's mine and this one's mine. It was really interesting to do that. And it was kind of like a meditative break from work because we're on devices so much that it's really challenging. Another thing that we do, speaking of virtual, being constantly on this thing, I wanted to have this be a a policy starting in 2020, but then something weird happened in 2020. I can't remember what, and we didn't do this. But what it was is instigating, and this I actually got from Jim Salters, a 10-minute break every hour. And so because we're virtual and people can start whatever time they want, some people start at 6 a.m., some people start at 9 a.m. It doesn't matter. So whenever you start your workday, to the best of your ability, take a break every 50 minutes for 10 minutes from your technology. Walk away from your laptop, your phone, and go take a walk, do some yoga stretches, throw in a load of wash. I don't care. Do something that is away from your device. Because there's twofold reason for that. One is that we live in a world of devices, and trying to go on a fast from them is stupid because you're going to have them forever. So we need to control them, not them control us. So that was the first goal. The second goal is these people work so hard that they tend to schedule meetings back to back to back to back. And there's no room. That's not creativity, and innovation doesn't happen in back-to-back meetings. It happens in the breaks. It happens when you take that 10-minute break and go for a walk outside and get some fresh air. You know, it happens when you take your mind off of whatever it is you're working on. So those were the two things. Well, the third thing too also is by taking that 10-minute break, it helps people protect their attention span. I listened to a podcast on that 10% Happier with Dan Harris. I love him. And there was an expert on talking about protecting your attention span. And that was one of the things that, limiting, setting it aside for 10 minutes, rather than like, some people will go on social media fasts or things like that. And her point was like, well, that's kind of like fasting on a diet. You're going to eat again. You're going to go back on here. So set up a way that you can manage it, as opposed to, thinking you're going to be all or nothing. And so that was another reason of asking people to do that. So all of these things are designed around a virtual environment, and also around I'm truly concerned, or concerned. Not concerned. I'm what's the word? Not concerned, but I care about the well-being of my employees, and that actually is a definition of love. Love is caring about the well-being of other people. So I truly do love my employees. I want their well-being, and so that's why I'm constantly thinking about what are things that we can do that will further the well-being of these people who, use their considerable talents and, of course, their time to feed into this organization that then allows me to go do other things. I mean, how lucky am I?
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I'm going to skip and ask a few more culture questions, because then I want to get to our usual podcast questions around worst things that happened and greatest lessons. But so there's very much a hustle culture. You were telling me some interesting things about being on a panel with a lot of tech people. Very hustle culture we have today. How have you been able to defend your space for kindness and help lead that balance at work?
Well, as I told you before, I can't stand the whole idea about hustle culture. I think it's stupid. I just don't like it. I don't like it at all. I think it implies, the thing I was telling you before, that there was an HBR article recently that just came out, and it was talking about how all these tech bros had this really great idea to move fast and break things. And the authors of this piece said, we've been cleaning up that mess for the past 10 years. And so we're going to move fast and fix things. So you don't have to move slowly to fix things, but you can move fast with some caution, with some thoughtfulness and things like that. And you don't have to break things. That's just dumb. That's just dumb. So I don't like the hustle culture at all. I don't think it's helpful. In terms of defending the kindness, it's interesting because I think sometimes people think, and I've said this for years, don't mistake my kindness for weakness. They're not the same. That I believe that clarity is kindness, right? And boundaries are kind. There are many things that are guardrails and things like that are kind, that are not weak in any way, shape, or form. So I don't know that I've really had to defend it. I think that the proof is in the outcome. A lot of happy employees. Nobody ever leaves. They stay, and people are always like, "Can I get a job there?" So, I think that kind of speaks for itself.
Speaks for itself. Yeah. Also, too, we were talking earlier, I'll throw this in. I loved your thoughts on, like, there's the tech culture and the fintech, all the different techs, but there is plenty of money to be made for entrepreneurs in service-based business, old school businesses. There's lots of money to be made in types of businesses that have been around for
Yeah.
many years. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
there's
think you have to be willing to be
lots of room.
nimble, and you have
Mhm.
to be
Mhm.
willing to iterate and to pivot and things like that. But yeah, I think entrepreneurs by nature, we're creative. We're going to look for opportunities and navigate the cracks, right? So, we got a whole world full of AI. Well, what's going on with that? I mean, I own a company that creates content, so we're introducing an AI product into our space. We don't know if it'll work or not. It's an MVP. We'll see what happens with it. And then you think about, well, what else can we offer? What can we do that would be of benefit to our current clients without having to move to an entirely new vertical at this point? So, you just have to be creative. And I'm incredibly fortunate that I have very, very bright people who also happen to be creative, which is a really powerful combination.
Amazing. Sounds like you have a great team. Okay, so question, tell me about a significant setback in your entrepreneurial journey and how you overcame it.
Um, I've shared this story before. Some people might have heard it, but I think it's worth repeating. As I said, I studied French in college. I never took a business class. And when I was building Writer Girl, I had an accountant who was a CPA. And I did come to realize that CPA simply means you can pass a test. It doesn't mean you have any financial acumen whatsoever. So what happened, I was on a cash basis because the business was a lot smaller. And then as it grew, we collected a lot of cash. The way that we work is we collect a lot of cash up front, which I love, and then we work it off. So it's a liability, right? We owe that money to somebody. Well, when you're on a cash basis, it looks like you have a whole lot of money, and you don't, you owe it to people. And I got divorced. And so I paid spousal support based on that cash basis because it flowed through. I'm an S corp, so it flowed through to my tax return. So it looked like I made all this money. Now, had I absconded with all of that money that was reported on my W-2 or on my whatever, my whole tax return, I would have been rightfully imprisoned, because I would have stolen people's money. But I honestly didn't know that at the time. And then I remember after the divorce, and I was talking to a different financial person, bringing them in. And I will never forget the epiphany. My CPA was sitting there too. And I said, wait a minute, did I pay spousal support based on a cash basis? And she was like, well, yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, like what? So I was really worried at that time. It was much smaller. This is a long time ago. It's back in like 2012, I think it was. So we were significantly smaller. And we went through mediation. And then when I went to, it was very quick because I basically just said yes to everything because I didn't want him to take half of my business, which he would have been entitled to because I built it while we were married. So we went to mediation. I just said yes to everything, spousal support, no child support because I paid for everything for our son. And then when I went to the attorney, I said, I want to make sure he can't come back for more money because I knew that this business was going to grow and I didn't want him to be able to come back. And he said, okay, but that means you can never not pay the spousal support either, even if you go bankrupt. And so I took a big risk and was like, I believe I can do that. And that scared the crap out of me because I was like, oh my gosh, like, can I actually do that? So, for a lot of people are not like me. They studied business. They know about these kinds of things. I didn't know that at all. It was a very big learning for me. So it's always good to have the language of business. I didn't have the language of business. I'm very facile with the language of finance now, but I was not then. So that was a big learning for me. That was a big learning.
Did it change how your approach to business and leadership, that whole lesson? Did it change how you do that?
That didn't change the way my approach to business and leadership. But another thing that happened, and this wasn't a setback, but it was a really valuable lesson that I learned. I was working with a coach, and this was probably around 2008, 9, something like that. We hadn't hit $1 million in revenue yet. And I remember she said to me, you are Writer Girl and Writer Girl is you. That was, most people know, that was the former name of our business. We're WG Content now, but you are Writer Girl and Writer Girl is you, and it won't grow until you do. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so what that led me to do was start a daily meditation practice. And I started reading habitually every morning. And they weren't really business books. They were more books focused on personal development, developing self-awareness, understanding myself, my behaviors, why I did what I did, and understanding the effect my behavior had on people around me. That changed my leadership drastically. And actually, shortly after that is when we hit $1 million in revenue for the first time. But I also was introduced to the Enneagram around the same time. And so I started studying that, which I personally really like it as a tool for understanding motivations for behavior as opposed to just behavior. I mean, there's a million tools out there. I just like this one because it's a little deeper, and that's the way I am. So when I learned that, what I learned about myself were different things, that different behaviors that were innate to me that that I could moderate because I'm a grown up. And so I can learn to do these things to moderate these behaviors so that I don't shut down people around me. Like, for example, I'm a very fast processor. That doesn't necessarily make me smarter than other people. I just process more quickly. If I do that in a meeting with my leadership team, and I just keep processing too quickly and I don't slow down and stop talking, then the people on my team that need more time to process and have really valuable things to share, they don't have time to do it. So I kind of shut them down. And, I like the John Maxwell saying, which is, alone we each have one idea, together we each have two. So it's like all these ideas that would just be shut down if I'm so busy talking and processing really quickly and doing what Tim Reddick says is seagulling, flying around and shitting all over people. If I do that, then I don't get their valuable insight, experience, and ideas. So learning to moderate my behavior through that coach and through access to the Enneagram vastly changed the way I lead. And then being an EO, fast forward to 2016, learning about experience sharing changed the way I led and the way I parent. I mean, and that's been big game changer. And people in my organization now do it. My leadership team does it. We've modeled it for them. We've done a lunch and learn on it and explained it to people. And everybody knows immediately that no one likes unsolicited advice or criticism, which is why we don't use the word feedback. Feedback is icky. But if you say coaching, like, you're really good at something, let's make you better at it, as opposed to feedback, which is like, you suck at this and now you have to go get better at it, So we're very careful about things like that.
Oh, fascinating, fascinating. Yeah, experience shares. Say a little bit more about experience share and what that means for people who might not know. And then how it affected you and the way you deal with your son, I thought was a great story as well. So
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, well, basically what we do in EO, if anybody's listening that isn't in EO, when you're in a forum, is that there are pretty strict protocols that have been around for over 40 years, and they're used across the globe in all the different chapters around the world. And the ones that succeed, like the one that I was in for a very long time, been around for a really long time, they follow those protocols. And one of them is, I still call it Gestalt, but now it is called Forum Mindset. And basically what it is you are not allowed to give any advice. So you can't say should or what you should do. You're not even supposed to say, I wonder if, because basically that's just a sneaky way to sneak in giving someone some advice. And so the way that I teach it, when I teach it to people, is saying it's really more about resonance. So if you can think about something that resonates with you, like if someone shares an experience that you haven't had, but they share a feeling around it, you can say, well, I haven't had that exact experience, but the feeling that you're talking about, I remember feeling that way when my dad was dying. I had the same sadness or the same grief or whatever it happens to be that someone is expressing. And it's a way of actually really building relationships based on feelings. And that is just the most important thing in the world. We know now from all of the latest neuroscience about fMRIs and neuroplasticity, and even that manifestation is actually a neurological process. I mean, it is scientific, it is proven, we've got the data. It's not just woo-woo, visualize something and it happens. It's actually brain science. But all of those things that, oh gosh, I think I lost my train of thought. That, oh
yeah,
yeah,
experience sharing. Yeah, how
really
it's
what we
better
know
way.
when I speak about the resonance, it's because, again, in forum, we have to lead with the feeling. And so I try and teach people to do that too. I've worked on that with my son too, is because we are feeling people first, and then the thought arises. We aren't thinking people who then have a feeling. So really accessing that. And when you access your feelings, then you can resonate with someone who is sharing something. And usually if someone is sharing something, it can be vulnerable, right? So jumping in when someone's sharing about going through a painful situation in their marriage, for example, if you jump in and say, well, you know what you should do? You should go see a counselor. It's like, no, instead of being like, wow, that's really hard. I appreciate you sharing that with me. And while I'm not in that current situation, I have been, and I remember that the pain of that or the vulnerability of that. And so what it does is it furthers your relationships, really. And that's what I did with my son. I was able to, instead of telling him what to do, I could be like, well, I mean, obviously he was a boy, I was a girl, but I could say, well, when I was your age or when I was a kid, this was the kind of thing I did, or this is what I've done in my current situation. I don't know, maybe that applies, maybe it doesn't, and kind of lead him to like, take, take, take it and do with it what you will, which is really what experience share is about. I was in this situation similar to yours. This is what I did, and this is how it worked out. So again, the experience share around my accounting situation, this is what I did. This is how it worked out. I would suggest you not do that, given the fact that it didn't work out well for me, but it's up to you. Do with it what you will.
Too funny. Well, I will just ask you three more questions. I've got three really good ones I'd like to ask you. What is a lesson you would share with entrepreneurs who are at the beginning of their entrepreneurial journey?
Well, I was a coach in the accelerator for a couple of years, and I'm not one of those scaling up coaches, because I think that looks hard. I mean, I think we've done it, but I couldn't do that book. So I'm not that kind of coach. I'm more the coach that is like, give yourself a break. This is really hard to do. And if it were not hard to do, everybody would do it. So give yourself a break, first of all. I had one of my people say once that, we still can't figure out our costs. I'm like, our business is a lot bigger than yours, and we still have a hard time figuring out our costs. I mean, everybody's got this idea that you're going to get things exactly right and buttoned down. And that just never happens. You will never get it done, and you can't get it wrong because you'll never get it done. That's the whole point. And so I just think that really encouraging people, particularly female entrepreneurs, because as you know, Margee, the female entrepreneurs that, first of all, they're rare, and getting to 1 million is really rare. There's a lot of small ones that are like under 250, but getting to 1 million is really rare, and getting up to 5 million is like hen's teeth. It's like you just don't even see it. So when I talk to women who are newer to the entrepreneurial journey, I just encourage them as much as I can and say, what you're doing is really hard. It's really hard, and seek other people, seek mentorship, and help. And if you have a specific problem, seek help with that specific problem. If you need help with accounting, find a good accountant. I'm happy to refer you to some people. Don't make it your friend. Now that's,
Yep.
an experience share.
Mhm.
Things like that. So that for me, again, it's much more about encouragement than it is about specific tactics for building a business.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. What's a book you've shared a lot of great books with me around entrepreneurship, leadership. What's a book or resource you'd like to share with everyone?
One of them that really doesn't have anything to do with business, but for anybody who's a parent, one of the best books I ever read is called How Will You Measure Your Life?
Mm.
And the author's name escapes me, right? Christensen is his last name. He was a professor at Harvard Business School. He went to Harvard Business School, and then he was a professor there. And unfortunately, he passed away from some kind of cancer. He wasn't that old, but it's an excellent book. And I read it with the intention of reading it kind of for my son. So what I did is I'm a big annotator in books anyway. So I annotated things and put my notes and comments in it, because my thinking really was, when I'm no longer here, he'll have this book and he can see what I thought was important. And he wrote this book for high achieving kids at elite universities, largely because it was Harvard, because all of them were saying things like, I'm going to go get a job, I'm going to work for McKinsey, or I'm going to go work at Big Law, or I'm going to do these kind of things. And then, after a few years, I'll do something else. Well, he said what happened is like that when they graduated, the world is your oyster when you're from Harvard Business School, right? And my son's at Georgetown Law School. It's probably going to be fine for him. But the problem is they get out, and then next thing you know, 5 years later, they're like, I'm not really loving this. This wasn't kind of what I was thinking. 10 years out, they are golden handcuffs. They've got the summer house, they've got fancy cars, they've got kids in private school, and they can't get out, and they're miserable. So this guy's thing is about, like, I say this all the time when I talk to young people, especially like my son's friends at law school, like, what do you want your life to look like when you're 40? And they are like, well, I haven't thought about that. And I'm like, well, you might want to, because if you don't, somebody else will think about that for you, and it will not be to your benefit. So you need to make the plan of what you want your life to be like when you're 40. And that book was so good and so helpful. And I think anybody who's a parent reading it for their kid, because it's like, looking ahead and saying, who am I going to be in the world? What are the principles upon which I'm going to stand and hold myself to? And what is my life going to look like when I'm 40? And what's my legacy going to be? And how do I start doing that now? So that's just one of the best books I've ever read. I love that book.
Fantastic. Love it. And I have loved so many of your book recommendations over the years. All right, last question. And how has your definition of success evolved over the years?
I don't know if I ever really, I'm kind of not someone who thinks about like what success looks like, but I would say, I think anybody who's listening to this, I've not had money and I've had money and I will take having money any day of the week. But that's not why I built my business. I mean, I built it because I had to. My husband at the time was a stay-at-home dad, and I mean, I had to. But then I think what happened as I could ease up a little bit because I have such a wonderful team of people, the thing that really gives meaning and purpose to my life and that can almost make me choke up when I actually talk about it is the privilege of feeding into the lives of the people that I lead. And I firmly believe that managing leadership is probably the best job in the world when done well and when done with both attention and intention, right? You got to have both, because you really do. You have such a great impact on the lives of the people that you lead. I mean, it's a lot. People spend so much time at work, but it's not just the time they spend at work. It's how they feel when they're not at work. You think about people now that are just like, I mean, so uncertain about their jobs and are we going to get fired tomorrow? And am I going to lose my health insurance? Think about the morale and think about the effect that that's having on their emotional well-being. I mean, that's really, really bad for people. So the fact that I can create, even in uncertain times, that I can lead with surety and with a clear-eyed vision of what we're doing and belief in this organization and the people that put their time and talents to work here. That's my definition of success.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. This has been great. If you have one more second, I have like a bonus question. What has being part of EO like meant to you, or what has been the most important thing about EO for you?
EO is just the best thing ever. And I can't believe I didn't know about it back when I qualified. I didn't even know about it. It is, by the way, all you EOers, talk about it more. I didn't know. My dentist told me about it, and she still isn't an EO, even though she qualifies. But I was so excited when I found this group of entrepreneurs. And, as I mentioned, my business happens to be all women. And I had been in a women's group of people that were, high levels. And that's great. But I was like, I really need some male energy too. I want to know about, male approaches to things. It's different than mine. And I think both we need both, right? So I really wanted that kind of input and experience. And so when I found EO, I was like, hallelujah, I've come home. And I really felt like when I joined, I remember talking to a fellow member and saying, I feel like these people get me, that when I'm directive in this group of people, they don't look at me as being some sort of brassy woman. They're like, oh, okay, that's a fellow entrepreneur. She probably knows what she's talking about. Which, by the way, if it ever comes to directions and I speak that way, I do not know what I'm talking about. I just speak with too much authority and I will lead us off a cliff. So, but yeah, I mean, it's like these people that get you. I'm sure you feel the same way. It's like they get you, that you have ideas and you see the possibility of things and you navigate the cracks and you think about, what else could we do? I wonder how I could connect these disparate ideas. I wonder if these things would work, and that other people like that too, that's been invaluable. I've loved meeting the people that I'm working with on a new business, are NEO from Houston. And that's great because it's working with someone who thinks like we do and is familiar with, the things that we talk about in EO. Just being around other entrepreneurs and the forum experience is amazing. And even though I left my forum because I was traveling a lot with my son before I went to law school, and I have great respect for the forum, and I didn't want to have to be in town 4 hours a month, but I also wasn't going to make everybody rearrange their schedule so that I could travel the world. So I left my forum. But the wonderful thing is that I've obviously maintained the friendships, but also that when I was having a couple issues, I could be like, hey, can I join you guys for details over dinner after your forum meeting, and kind of because they know me very well. And so I could say, this is kind of what's happening. What do you think? And it just so valuable to have that kind of, to be known by people like that is a really, it's a gift. It's a true gift.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a wonderful episode, and I've loved all of your sharing. So thank you very much, Christy.
Thank you for having me, Margee. I appreciate it. It's fun.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye.